Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Index Office Hours. Today is the 29th of October and this is Index Office Hours 181. Wow, can't believe that we are so far into the IOH journey, but here we are. And for anyone who's new to Index Office Hours, this is the town square where graph ecosystem participants come together and discuss the most important and relevant topics for indexers. As always, this is a conversation, so if you'd like to get involved in today's conversation, please do via voice or text. And if you have any challenges with your voice, let me know and I will get that sorted for you. And just as a reminder, this is a session that's going to be recorded and posted onto public channels like YouTube. So if you are concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. And with that, let's get into today's agenda. Okay, so we have the latest 𝗨𝗀𝗳𝗂𝗹 episode. And that, I believe, is 192 with, here it is, Steve Kim. And Steve Kim is the co-founder of 4Pillars, which is a global blockchain research firm based in Seoul, South Korea. They have done a variety of things in the Web3 space, namely around the infrastructure aspect of Web3. Steve has an academic background himself with an economics degree from Penn State University, with a minor in political philosophy. He talks about his passion for blockchain and how that came to be. He has a particular keen interest in Austrian economics. He talks a bit about his early life in South Korea, his studies in the US, how he came to come across blockchain and some of the work that he's doing, of course, with 4Pillars, his global research firm. And then, of course, discusses the graph and the importance of the graph. And so if you want to hear any of those topics and are interested in his life, his perspective, then do go check out the episode, which Juan has, boom, already posted. So thank you, sir. Amazing. And then without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anna for our regularly scheduled Repo Watch section.
Thank you, Abel. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. So today on Repo Watch, starting with execution layer clients, we have had a new release for Aragon. This is version 2.60.9, which introduces a breaking change by restricting OS support to Linux, ARM64, and specific AMD 64 versions. It also includes multiple improvements and bug fixes that are aimed at enhancing performance, as well as resolving some known issues around memory management and RPC errors. This is we've added urgency indicators to our Repo Watch, so this is a yellow urgency indicator, which means it adds improvements and bug fixes, but is not necessarily critical for updating. Then on consensus layer clients, we have had a new release for 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗪. This is version 24.10.3, which also includes bug fixes and networking improvements, enhanced block production compatibility, plus other cleanups. This is also urgency indicator yellow, so important only for performance stability. We also have a new Nimbus update, so version 24.10.0, also performance boosts and stability fixes with some improvements around execution payload, block hash verification, and validator client stability. This one is still a yellow indicator for urgency, but administrators should prioritize updating if the Beacon REST API is exposed externally. Then on the graph stack, we have had a new release of Indexer Tap Agent. So this is version 1.3.0, which adds a counter trigger for RAV requests and includes bug fixes to improve request handling. Also a yellow urgency indicator. On Launchpad stack, we have had a new stable release for the graph node chart, and we have also had a bunch of new Canary releases for most of our Launchpad charts. these come with a warning that we have changed the access mode for some of the pods to be a read-write once pod. And you will need to add that value to override the default for specific charts. I'll send the link with an example in a second. On namespaces, we have also had new stable releases of Polygon, Graph, and Arbitrum. This is all from RepoWatch, so handing over to Juan and grabbing that link in a second. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Hannah. Okay, getting into Protocol Watch. First of all, forum governance, we have a new request for information about disputes. This is GDR 18. The post itself is really well explained, so if you're interested in disputes, I think this is a very interesting case where there's a lot of pre-existing...
Is it me, or can I not hear Juan?
Oh, really? Can everyone hear me?
I can hear one.
I think it's just you, Abel.
Okay.
Okay.
It seems he's not able to hear me. Okay. No pun intended, or maybe yes. Okay. Yeah, there's another dispute. There's a lot of interesting data in the dispute. So yeah, if you're interested in disputes, that is an interesting one. For forum research, we don't have any new updates since last IOH. For the contracts repository, there's only one PR that's new, which is adding the missing 2023 audit reports, also quite interesting. And there's nothing new for the network subgraphs, so that's pretty much it. I don't know, Paka, if you have your section now, but I'm handing over to you now.
Hey, it's a non-traditional section. Let's put it that way. I guess a kind of a more traditional update while this is loading, just to buy some time. Graph node, new release coming soon, TM. Really just waiting on some final integration tests to complete, and then we're going to slam publish, so really excited for that. I'm going to tease that today, so keep an eye out for v036.0. And then now to the elephant in the room. Can you all see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's been a long time coming, but today we can all embrace our inner sad cowboy and say farewell to indexer service TypeScript. This component has been a long-term friend of ours as indexers, but I wanted to say that it's going to retirement, so to speak, on December 4th at 9 a.m. And so what this actually means, in a slightly less ironic meme-heavy delivery, is the ecosystem is deprecating indexer service TypeScript in favor of the new indexer service written in Rust as part of the broader transition to the timeline aggregation protocol, otherwise known as TAP. And so on December 4th at 9 a.m. Pacific, the gateway will start enforcing this deprecation. And put more plainly, indexers still running indexer service TS will not be eligible to serve queries on the network. So in terms of next steps for you all, this is kind of an alpha sharing of the news, but there's going to be the official announcement and related instructions and documentation released today after IOH. I just really want to encourage, start migrating today if you haven't already done so. There's already a pretty significant amount of the network traffic, query traffic happening on tap, so really excited to hear that. Indexers have preemptively been switching over, but really time now the next little over a month to make the switch official. And so if you have any questions or encounter any issues, please do reach out. Don't hesitate to tag Gustavo or myself on Discord and help each other via the Indexer software channel. And that's really it for this announcement. I haven't been keeping track of chat while I've been talking, so Abel, please do let me know if I am in need of responding to something. Yeah.
Yes.
That's all right.
Yeah, Vince has a question. If you can see chat now, or happy to read out.
Find it. So I'll read it out loud. I heard lingering things about problems with tap. Is that going to be prod ready by December 4th? I can only speak for what I've been hearing from the semiotic team and seeing from others. I do think so. I'm not sure if the semiotic team is here today to speak to that, but I would encourage them to kind of step up to the mic. But or any other indexer that can share the proverbial works on my machine gold star. Yeah. And also any feedback to suggest that that's too early would also be very helpful as well. So really just want to open the discourse here. But thanks for the question, Vincent. Thanks. Okay. Whoever asked. Already the chat is lost to me. Shout out to GraphOps and GraphSeer with the indexer profiles showing badges related to the tap migration. It's pretty cool.
Seems like we got a response from our country on that. If that's helpful for you, Vince.
Yeah, that's something I will speak to. Gustavo and Carlos are extremely responsive and fast to kind of get fixes in. But yeah, I think it would be nice to have them here to help with this migration. So I'll nudge them.
Yeah, I see Pity saying it'd be great to have Gusto on the upcoming IOHs for Q&As. Yeah, I'm happy to put that together. In fact, I'll make a note of that so that that gets followed up on. IOH stop tap. Cool. I will follow up on that. That's a good shout. We are going to do a session where we go deeper into tap as well. So hopefully that we can get Gustav on that. Just want to let you know, I split my. Oh no. Oh. Sorry, that sounds terrible, Anna. Well, actually, good because it spared your laptop. Um, that's pretty good. But I'm sorry that the coffee spilled. That sucks. Okay. Cool. Let's keep the questions coming, tap related if there are any. In the meantime, let's circle back to the questions that Pierre asked. So what is the GraphCast? Oh, okay, these are quite fundamental. What is GraphCast and the roadmap? We covered that a while ago. We had GraphCast like many dedicated GraphCast sessions. So I guess we could I mean, Pilly, what do you think? How do you think we should approach this? What do you mean with this question? Yeah. After all, uh, yeah. I guess Pilly, he's just asking like for some basic information about what it is and the roadmap. But there's let me see if I can try to link you to some stuff we've done before in the past, which would be useful. Maybe Pearly, you can speak to updates on the roadmap. I don't have the latest on that, so maybe you could share that. But in terms of what it is, I can share you a link for that. We already put a bunch of information on these.
Yes, we can share some links, but GraphCast is there. Indexes are using GraphCast. From the team, we are maintaining the subgraph radio, and yeah, we are also working now on some dependencies updates for Grafana dashboards, but we have not much in the roadmap as the radio is stable and is there. But if you have any feature requests, please feel free to shout in the GraphCast channel. We are always happy to hear what our users think, and yeah. But I have like know a strong sense of what do you mean with the question. So
Yeah. In the meantime, Paka, you said that you can speak to the allocation optimizer, so feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, so this is something I've been talking about on and off lately with Ford. But really, we want to put some more energy, probably in 2025, into uh, somehow improving the allocation optimizer experience for query fees. 'Cause right now, it's essentially limited to optimizing for indexing fees, but we really want to streamline the process for indexers to chase query fees. And so that's kind of one train of thought we're kind of in the really early stages of thinking about. And then as a next step to that would be a tighter integration into Indexer Agent, just to streamline allocation management uh, operations a lot more, just to make your lives easier. So that's really all I have to share at the moment. It's really kind of more uh, future-looking things. I'd say allocation optimizer for indexer or for indexing fees is largely in maintenance mode. I've submitted some PRs recently just to remove hosted service kind of mentions, but there's not really active development happening there. But there's a variety of indexers using it to pretty good results on the network. So I'd encourage checking that out as well if you're interested.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, and as you can see, there's some links there from Catherine and Pilly. Thank you so much both for linking some stuff there. So hopefully that's useful for you, Pierre. Alrighty. If anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to type in the chat and we'll try and get them. That's funny. We'll try and get them answered for you. In the meantime, we have the good fortune of inviting the Blast folks onto today's into today's call. As you guys know, we're supporting the network, and many of you, I'm sure, have questions about Blast, how the ecosystem works, and how to best support it as indexers. And so, without further ado, let's take it away with the Blast presentation.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. I shared my slides. Can you guys see that?
Yep, we can see them.
Okay, cool. So first, just want to start out with a thanks to you, Abel, for the invite, and really to the whole community here for having me on today to talk a little bit about Blast. I am Nereid. I do DevRel for Blast, and here's some of the places where you can get in touch with me after this if you want to continue the conversation. These slides are going to be available in the agenda, I believe, so you can always refer back to that to get these contact information. So people always ask where this name Nereid comes from, so I'll give you a little bit of a backstory by way of introduction. When I joined the Blast team, I was asked to choose a pseudonym that was moon themed, and all the kind of top tier moons were already taken by the time I got there. So I saw Nereid, which looks cool enough, and it turns out it's a moon of Neptune. So I subsequently found out that Nereid is also the name of these sea nymphs in Greek mythology. So they kind of hang out in the ocean and help, shipwrecked sailors who are traversing these troublesome seas, which ends up being kind of an appropriate fit for DevRel work. So that's me. Quick overview of what I'm going to be going over today. Firstly, what is Blast? I'm sure some of you guys are already aware of what the network is and what we do, but I want to take some time to highlight some of the unique aspects of what separates Blast from other L2s in the space. And then I'll talk about what it looks like to run a Blast node, pointing out the best practices and common pitfalls that you guys want to avoid. Then I'll share some support resources, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. I'll also pause at certain points for Q&A, and Abel, also, if there's any point that you feel like a question is, needs to be brought up in the moment, feel free to interrupt me, and I'm happy to take questions that way too.
Yes, sir, will do.
Cool. So jumping right in, what is Blast? And this is actually a question that I want to pose to you guys just out of curiosity. Whenever I dip into a new community, it's always valuable to see what the public perception is outside of the little ecosystem bubble that I typically exist in. So if you guys could just drop in the chat, like, what is your first impression when you hear Blast?
That's a great question. I'm very curious to hear people's perspectives. So, folks, feel free to type in the chat.
You can be honest if it's a negative impression too. Still need indexing blaster words, right? I believe that is the case. I see some folks typing, so I'll give you guys a sec. Blazing fast. Okay, I'll take it. Fruit gushers, that's pretty awesome. Cool, so I'll let you guys keep typing. I don't see anything super negative, so I'm happy about that. So Blast is an Ethereum L2. We're based on the OP stack, but we've made some modifications to the execution client to enable some of these unique features. So I'm going to highlight these two features. One is native yield, and the other is gas revenue sharing. Both of these features are things that give people building on Blast access to new ways of monetizing their projects. So starting off with native yield, when we talk about this, what is native yield in the first place? What we mean by native yield on Blast is that just by holding ETH or USDB, which is Blast's stablecoin, on your EOA, you earn yield passively. So there's no action that you need to take. You don't need to interact with any DeFi protocol to take advantage of this. It just sort of works because native ETH on Blast, like the currency that you pay gas with, is auto rebasing. So that just means over time your balance can grow without inflows coming in. With respect to what tokens support native yield, I mentioned ETH, also wrapped ETH. When you bridge that over, it gets converted to that automatically rebasing ETH. And then also some popular stable coins that we support, DAI, USDC, USDT, all of those get converted to our stablecoin USDB on the Blast side so that we can offer that native yield. So I think the next natural question is like, where does this yield come from? How does this system work? And I've got this kind of simplified diagram over here on the slide that I'm going to run through to kind of give you a high-level overview of how this system works. So when you bridge your ETH, and we use ETH as the example here, when you bridge your ETH over to Blast, it first hits our bridge contract, but from there, it's routed to this entity that we call the yield manager. And the role of the yield manager in the system is to stake your funds with one of our underlying yield providers. So in the case of ETH, the yield manager is going to stake your funds in Lido and then custody the STETH that you get back from that until you decide you want to withdraw from the network. So the yield is coming from one of these existing, protocols that offers yield. And as yield gets earned in these protocols on the L1, it's reported on a daily basis to the L2. And at the point of these yield reports, that's when the yield gets distributed to all balances on Blast that are ETH balances. So when it's time to withdraw from Blast, when you want to bridge off, this whole thing basically just unwinds in reverse. Your ETH is first burned on the Blast side, and then it's unstaked by the yield manager and released back to the user. So one common criticism that I hear about native yield is that Lido and these other protocols are things that anybody can tap into. I can stake my ETH directly with Lido. I don't need Blast to do that. And the response that we kind of have to that is, that's true. It is possible for you to stake with Lido, but in reality, there's a ton of what we call just resting ETH sitting around that is not earning yield that it could be for one reason or another. So one barrier to entry is that there is some DeFi knowledge you need to have in order to stake with Lido. It's not a huge barrier, but this is going to bar out some new users. Another place is like ETH that is stuck in DAO treasuries or something like that. Currently, if you have your ETH in a multi-sig, it's obviously not earning any yield for you. It's not doing any work for you. Another interesting one is like LP position. So if you are providing liquidity, ETH liquidity to some liquidity pool, the funds that you have sunk into that pool aren't earning ETH for you, but the way native yield works on Blast opens up the possibility for you to get yield on that while you're already getting the benefits of providing liquidity. And then pretty common too is a bunch of EOAs that just have ETH in their wallets and they are planning to use it in the near future, so they don't have it tied up in any protocols. So in all these cases, it kind of removes it closes these gaps and kind of makes earning yield something that you don't even have to think about. Another thing to touch on here is that I mentioned we use Lido for our ETH yield provider. Right now, we're using MakerDAO's DSR, the DAI savings rate module, for USDB yield. So how that works is whenever you bridge DAI USDC or USDT over to Blast, it all kind of collapses into USDB. So we don't really have a concept of DAI or USDC on the Blast side. It's all just USDB. And these yield providers are flexible in that we can swap them out at a later point if, for example, a protocol comes along that offers better yield. And one thing we also hope to see in the future is some Blast native yield providers. So these would be homegrown protocols on Blast that can offer yield to the entire ecosystem. So native yield is something that is available to both EOAs and smart contract accounts. But how the default behavior here for these two different types of accounts varies a little bit. So all accounts have some configuration options that allows them to decide how native yield will interact with their account. And the biggest configuration here is the yield mode. So there's 3 different yield modes. The first is automatic. When you're using automatic yield mode, this is where the automatic rebasing comes in. Your balances just grow. And this is the default behavior for EOAs. The next one is void yield mode. And in void yield mode, yield is effectively disabled. This is the default for smart contracts because we want to avoid situations where contracts deploying on Blast that maybe have some unique accounting logic that would conflict with native yield. We want to avoid that. So this is the default behavior for smart contracts. Then the third option here is claimable yield. When you're using claimable yield mode, you still earn yield, but it accumulates outside of your account in a separate location where you can claim it whenever you want. You also have the flexibility to configure what we call a governor. And the governor is basically another account that you're delegating the right to claim that yield to. So what usually happens with contracts is they'll add some configuration logic to set their desired yield mode and all that in their constructor. But these configuration options remain something that you can modify at any point by interacting with this yield precompile that is part of Blast's execution client. If you're not familiar with the difference between a normal smart contract and a precompiled contract, in the case of yield regular smart contracts, what you have is bytecode deployed at a particular address. But with precompiles, we still access them at an address, but there's no bytecode that lives there. And instead, we're accessing some logic that's baked directly into the execution client. So in the case of our yield precompile, that's something that's written in Go and lives inside of our fork of OP-Geth, which is blast-Geth. And that's what I want to talk about next. Is we've made some changes to our execution client, forking 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗂 in order to support native yield, and also the gas revenue sharing that I'll talk about in a bit. So here on the slide, I've got the object that represents the account balance within Geth. 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗂 is on the left, Blast Geth is over here on the right, and you can see that in 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂, balance is just represented as a single integer. Over on the Blast side, we represent balance of an account as the product of shares and a global share price. So when I said earlier that yield reported to the L2 gets distributed out to all accounts, this is the actual mechanism that makes that possible. You can see here that without gaining any additional shares, if we update the share price, then your balance is going to increase. And that's exactly how it works. When we report yield to the L2, that global share price is increased and everybody benefits. We also have the remainder here that's part of the balance formula. And the remainder there is just a mechanism that allows us to maintain way level precision, which is important for compatibility throughout the EVM ecosystem. So if we didn't have the remainder, your balance would only be able to be some multiple of the share price. So if you have like some dusty value, a few way, that's how it's represented is using this remainder field. There's a few additional fields that are added there that I'll just touch on real quick. One of them is flags. So that's basically an enum that stores the current yield mode that your account's configured to. And then you've got fixed. And fixed is kind of just the same as the original account balance in 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂. That's what you would use in cases where you're using void yield mode and automatic yield is just disabled. So again, native yield is a way for teams to access revenue that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And we've seen a lot of cool experimentation with this feature, and we continue to see innovation in this area. I just wanted to highlight a few of the cool examples we've seen. The first is this concept of refundable NFTs that originated on Blast. And the concept here is instead of just minting an NFT, what you do when you're minting is effectively locking up that mint price for some period of time. And the way that the creator of that collection monetizes that collection is by collecting the yield that's earned over that lockup period, plus any royalties that they might earn through, participating secondary sales. And that lockup period is something that the creator of the collection gets to define. And then after this lockup period, you as the owner of the NFT have a few different options. You can hang on to it if you want to stay in the community, and that allows the creator of the collection to continue earning yield on your locked up funds. If you decide you don't want the NFT anymore and you'd rather get a full refund of that mint price, you can burn the NFT to collect your, the mint price you originally paid. And then a third option that some collections use is this upgrade thing, where you can kind of give up the right to a refund in order to upgrade your NFT. And you can think of, situations where you might upgrade to add additional traits or whatever to make the NFT more rare. And we have a launchpad on Blast called Blaster, which makes it super easy to deploy one of these refundable NFT collections. A specific example of one of these collections is this project called 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂𝗪, which uses this refundable NFT mechanism for charity. So what they do is they direct the yield that's collected on the collection to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society to fund cancer research. So it's just a cool specific use case there. The next one here is earning yield on open positions. So I mentioned this before in the case of liquidity pools. We also have a prediction market on Blast called Predict. It's at predict.fun, and they have a lot of really fun markets that you can participate in, they also offer this yield on open positions. So say you're going to place a bet on the outcome of the upcoming US presidential race, you can earn yield on the fund that you've put into that bet. And the way that this works is the funds are actually being put into one of Predict's contracts, and they're redirecting that yield back to the user who's opened the position. And this is something we see used in different ways. There's a lot of situations where users are putting funds into a protocol, and then that dApp or protocol is responsible for redistributing the yield. They can do it in a straightforward way, like proportionally to the deposits, or maybe they want to do it more selectively and like concentrate that yield and give it out to different users to incentivize certain behaviors. So that's a pretty common pattern we see. And then lastly here, we've got this idea of lossless gambling or a lossless lottery. And sometimes this is applied more generally in the context of on-chain gaming. But the idea here is to take the lotto as an example. You might buy a lottery ticket, and similar to the NFT case, those funds get locked up for some period of time, and the yield becomes the reward that's given to, a random ticket at the end of the lockup period, and then everybody gets their funds back. So yeah, kind of some fun examples demonstrating how native yield has been used in practice. The other feature that I want to highlight here is this gas revenue sharing mechanism. Again, this is something that required some modifications to our execution client to implement. But the idea here is that when users spend ETH on transactions, those gas fees are something that you as the creator of the dApp can collect yourself. So this is another stream of revenue that really isn't open to dApps unless they've achieved this scale where it makes sense to launch their own app chains where they're able to access sequencer fees. Gas revenue sharing allows dApps, regardless of their size, to tap into this source of revenue. And the way we've set it up, there's some protections against abuse here. Immediately, you're able to claim 50% of the L2 execution costs associated with your dApp. Over a period of about 30 days, that gas matures and you're able to get 100% of it out. So this is just to prevent situations where, a malicious developer eats up our entire block space and then immediately gets a refund on the gas as a way of griefing the chain. So yeah, before I get into the details of running a Blast node, I just wanted to pause here to see if there was any questions about anything I've talked about so far, just kind of general Blast stuff or native yield or gas revenue sharing.
Yes, yeah. So we've got one from Vince asking, curious the decision on being an L2 and not just a roll-up. Seems like an app chain, no?
It's not quite an app chain. I mean, we have a bunch of projects building on Blast, and a way of viewing it is it's like an app chain for everybody, right? Because we have this gas revenue sharing. Some dApps that might want to roll their own app chain can simply deploy on Blast and get some of the same benefits there.
Amazing. Hopefully that's cleared up some of your the question, Vince. I think that was asked quite early, and I think you elaborated, and I think it also just answering the question was really good. Pilly's typing here. I see she might have a question, so we'll just wait there for a sec. Oh, she's still typing. Anyone have any questions? Nope. Okay. In that case, keep rolling.
Cool. So before I get into the details here, I'm curious how many of you out there have experience working with other OP stack chains running nodes like for Optimism or for Base. Abel, do you know how common that is amongst the community here?
Sorry, one more time.
Experience running Optimism or Base nodes.
Yes.
Like
Yeah. yeah, lots of people, as you can see in the chat here, we were on Optimism and base archive nodes. We were in the OP stack chains, etc., etc. Yeah, a lot of people.
Sweet.
Everyone pretty much does, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you pretty much all do. So, I mean, the process of running a Blast node is pretty much identical. So it should be super familiar to you already. The modifications I mentioned to the execution client don't really have any implications for operating a node. So same deal as what you're used to. We make Docker images available for both our execution client, BlastGeth, and OP node. And in our documentation, you can find a couple different step-by-step setups to get you going. The first is this basic setup, which is what you'd want to use if you just want to get up and running as fast as possible. This provides a pre-configured Docker Compose file. So all you really need to do is get in there and customize some of the environment variables. So set your L1 RPC, your beacon RPC, and just run Docker Compose up, and you should be off and running. The advanced setup linked here is for folks who prefer to build and run their own Docker images. Maybe you have some, custom setup needs, and this might be a better option for you. On snapshots, there's also an article in the docs about taking advantage of the weekly snapshot that we do. So you can go there to get the link to that, as well as usage instructions. It is an archive snapshot, so it's big. It's like 3 terabytes as of the creation of this presentation. So one thing we recommend is using ARIA2 to download this. It can really improve download speeds. 3 terabytes is not big. Good. I'm glad. And so if you're not familiar with ARIA2, it's a command line utility. It's kind of like wget on steroids. So it takes this big file you're looking to download and breaks it up into chunks, and then allows you to download those chunks in parallel. And it really speeds things up. So there's instructions on how to use that in the docs as well. The link to the snapshot you can find inside that link to the snapshot article in the docs. So another thing that I want to touch on here is because of the modifications we made to the execution client, we don't really follow directly with the update schedule of Optimism and the other OP stack chains. So it's important that if you're going to run a Blast node, you tune in or subscribe to some of the channels where we make announcements on upcoming upgrades. Currently, we're still on Ecotone, which is the upgrade where EIP 4844 or blobs was introduced. So just a note there that we're kind of on our own timeline. It takes more time to integrate some of these changes in to our clients, and we also kind of pick and choose what we want to incorporate. We're not really part of the super chain either. So let me look at the questions here real quick. Yeah, regarding the channels that the announcements go on, I'll have some more details on those coming up in a subsequent slide. Okay. Blobs, blobs, blob. Yes. Okay. So here's some hardware requirements. The caveat here is mileage may vary, and the actual requirements are going to vary based on what kind of usage and load you're actually seeing. But just kind of a ballpark, this is what we would recommend. I think in the Optimism docs, they say with respect to CPU, any modern CPU will do the job. And I think that's pretty accurate. So here we've just got 8 virtual CPUs or something in that ballpark. Memory, you want to have 32 gigs. Storage, you need 4 terabytes of disk space to store that Geth data, and maybe some additional space if you want to use the snapshot and need to decompress it. You can obviously do that in place too and use less disk space, but if you want to avoid doing that, you might want some extra disk space. Another bottleneck that we sometimes see is IO speed. So you want to shoot for 3,000 IO operations per second and around 125 megabytes of throughput. So an example of a storage solution that is in line with these specs would be AWS GP3 volume. So I don't really know, to be honest, what kind of scale you guys are operating on as indexers, but I'm assuming you're running multiple nodes for the sake of redundancy. And in that case, you definitely want to have some load balancer out in front of this cluster. So we have a few different recommended options here. The first is ProxyD, which is a purpose-built, Ethereum reverse proxy that has a lot of cool features like built-in health checking. So you can determine if one of your nodes goes down and redirect traffic to one of your healthy nodes in that case. So we've got a download link. You can download this over at the GitHub repo for ProxyD, and there's also some sample configs linked here that you can reference to get this set up. Another option that isn't Ethereum specific, but also works is Nginx. You can configure this to be a reverse proxy, and it has a lot of flexibility and different load balancing strategies like round robin, least connections, etc. And then finally, if you prefer not to run your own infrastructure here, there's managed solutions available like AWS's application load balancer. And here's an example config if you wanted to use Nginx. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but it's here for you in the slides if you want to refer back to it. And then just some tips and common issues that I see. The first is to avoid using SnapSync when you're running a Blast node. Because we're an OP stack chain, this should work in theory, but in practice, there's not really sufficient peers operating on the network that are participating in peer-to-peer to make this a reliable syncing option. We don't really have any incentives at the moment on Blast for node operators to participate in peer-to-peer. So yeah, for that reason, you want to avoid SnapSync. Another thing that comes up pretty often here is that you want to use an L1 beacon RPC that maintains historical blob data. I can't remember the exact error here, but it's something like, complaining about L1 sidecars missing. I see this a bunch, and it becomes an issue if you're syncing from Genesis or far back, and you need to access a blob that your beacon node does not have. So typically, beacon nodes will only maintain blobs so many blocks back, and for that reason, it might be out of reach. So some solutions here that do offer historical blob data are Anchor, Chainstack, Conduit, Nirvana Labs, QuickNode, and DRPC. Or of course, you can configure your own beacon client to maintain blobs far back. Another tip here, if you can swing it, having at least one archive node in your cluster is a good idea. I've seen situations where, like a really deep reorg will cause issues for full nodes, but the archive nodes just keep chugging along. So it's a good idea to have one of those as a failover in these types of situations. And then finally, this one isn't really a big deal, but a little tip for faster syncing is using the appropriate setting for L1 RPC kind. So this is an OP node configuration setting, and it allows you to specify what type of L1 RPC you're using, whether specifying the particular service provider or the client type. And the reason this can speed things up is it allows OP node to fetch things more effectively. If you use the default, which is standard, I believe, or any, OP node is going to try a bunch of different strategies. And if you narrow it down to one of these more specific options, it can more effectively fetch the necessary data for syncing. All right, support. So the first place you might want to check out is our developer Discord. This is a Discord dedicated just to questions about building on Blast. We have an infrastructure channel on there that you want to check out, specifically as node operators. There's a lot of great discussion there, and it's likely that if you run into a problem, one of these other node operators has brought it up and discussed it, and likely there's a solution in that channel. If not, you can always open up a ticket. I'm always hanging around in that Discord, and opening up a ticket is a great way to get in touch. We do our own office hours on a monthly basis, developer office hours, on the second Thursday of each month at 12 p.m. Pacific or 7 p.m. UTC. So you can join us there to get your questions answered in real time. And then there is also an announcements channel on that Discord. This announcements channel, along with the next bullet, the developer announcements telegram that we have, these are two channels that we will push out notifications of upcoming network upgrades. So definitely want to subscribe to those so that you have sufficient time to upgrade your node when an upgrade is coming down the pipe. And then, of course, the link to our docs here, where you'll find additional information on all of the stuff I talked about, including those step-by-step guides on getting your node up and running. And here's my contact information again. Would be happy to hear from you to continue talking about anything we discussed here, or if you run into issues, feel free to hit me up. And yeah, that is it. So thank you guys again for having me on. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that might have come up.
I tried to use the soundboard there. That was great. I am thoroughly impressed. That was a very in-depth breakdown of Blast and how to support it, essentially. I love that you went into the tips and tricks of running a node as well. I guess you've been answering questions throughout, so that's been pretty good. But now is a fantastic opportunity if folks have any lingering questions to ask them. I think Payne wants to know what an archive node is, but he's trolling there, which is
I'm not sure what an archive node is.
There you go. We'll all have to do Google search that after this. And it seems like you've got a DM there from Lewis from Pinax. So it seems like conversation's already starting. Yeah, I think you did a great job. Honestly, like as I said, this is the whole aim of this is to get people to understand. So, yeah.
Other questions, make it a fast forward. With this, you might discussion about Blast as trying to be full stacking. Kind of what we're trying to really unified user experience on mobile by working on a Blast.
Because I watched the video and it was very comprehensive, but just to give people like a sneak peek, like feel free to go down the rabbit hole around the full stack chain thing, because I think it's pretty compelling. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, the full stack chain thing is really right now the user experience when you're doing stuff on chain is fragmented, right? You get a wallet, fund that wallet, and then navigate to all these different dApps. The idea of the full stack chain is to have all of this bundled up in one experience. So we want to be able to onboard users quickly. The Blast app is going to have a built-in on-ramp, and you'll have access to a wallet and all of the dApps on the in the ecosystem will be accessible there too. So really trying to make it easy for new users to come online and start experimenting in the Blast ecosystem. And it should be a great user experience for, people who already have experience as well.
Fantastic. That seems to have sparked a few questions. So we've got one from Vince asking, just to clarify, the snapshots are archive, right?
Correct. The snapshots are archive. We don't have testnet snapshots at the moment, so that's one additional little tidbit of info there. But the mainnet snapshot is an archive snapshot. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then we have another one from Pierre saying, what are the current needs for subgraphs? Is there something that needs to be indexed? And he links to the guide on indexing account balances in the documentation.
I'm not really sure how to answer that one. I think subgraphs, I remember there was a while back where their incentives weren't turned on for Blast, and I'm not actually sure of the status of that now. But yeah, I think in general, dApps just need indexing solutions. I don't really know of any specifics to say there, but yeah, dApps are always looking for a better experience indexing so that they have access to the data they need in their dApps.
Yeah, very true. Keep them coming, folks. It's a great opportunity to have your questions answered. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask. See, Pierre is typing. Now he stopped. Let's go for one more because we're coming up on the hour. So, and we also just want to make sure that we respect everyone's time. We've got the good fortune of having the Blast folks come over, so I just want to make sure that we're respecting their time. But yeah, one more, and then I think we'll wrap up. There you go. Any plans for validators on Blast?
I'm glad you asked that. We don't have any specific plans, but just as a general statement, we are on this path to progressive decentralization, and that's something that we'll be looking at in the future.
Boom, there you have it. It was an absolute pleasure to sit here and listen to this. I learned so much. I'm sure everyone else did as well. I think this was one of the more comprehensive Chain Watch segments that we've done. I think all of you will agree with me in saying that this was a great presentation. I've linked it in the chat, of course, so you can go ahead and see all the resources, all the links that have been shared. Special thank you to you for coming along. I didn't understand. I didn't have an appreciation for the pseudonym until now. So I appreciate you sharing that as well. That was great.
Sure.
I still can't pronounce it though. How do you pronounce it?
𝗨𝘀𝗧𝗓. I think it looks more intimidating than it actually is to say, or maybe I'm just used to it. But yeah, 𝗨𝘨𝗧𝗓.
Nereid. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Nereid. We very much do appreciate you. Fantastic presentation. As you can see, everyone's saying thank you in the chat, so they loved it too. As you said, you've put your contact details and ways for people to get in touch. So, folks, feel free to go there. And thank you so much. And we'll any final words maybe before we wrap, Nereid?
Just I appreciate you guys having me on, and I hope to hear from some of you. If you guys have any questions about Blast